Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships, and another one of these unique upgrades getting changed this update. Petro, legendary mod, has been one of my favorites, okay? It turns Petro from a bit of a shotgun into a fairly reliable cruiser with its main guns. 10% better dispersion is incredible in this game. That is just shy of the American 6 upgrade slot for battleships, which I always take. It is also just like having outnumbered consistently procced on your ship. It is very, very good. Petro, of course, has a weird dispersion curve too, where at close range, it's better than cruiser dispersion. At long range, it's quite a bit worse. So at these closer ranges, stacking all these dispersion buffs makes it into a bit of a laser. And with the armor profile we have, we can afford to play at these closer ranges. Petro is awesome for all of these reasons. This legendary mod, though, a little too strong in Wargaming's eyes, so they are nerfing it here. What have they done? They have removed the penalty to number of ship consumable charges. That was the old issue with this legendary mod, is you just got one less consumable on all of your consumables, which made you a little bit less tanky, a little bit less valuable as a radar ship. So they've removed that. What are they doing instead? Well, 25% reduced duration of all ship consumables. That is a massive penalty, okay? First of all, healing, of course, that is a big change, where we may still have the same total healing as old leg mod Petro, but we need to get to an entire 4th consumable to get that same amount. So 3 heal Petro from last update would give you the same amount of healing as 4 heals now with Petro. 80-second cooldown there, that is certainly a downside. And another key downside to this upgrade now is your radar duration being cut by 25%. That sounds bad, but it gets worse because we all know there is that brief period of time when you click your radar that those ships that are spotted by your radar aren't spotted for your teammates. It's minimap only spotting for the first 6 seconds or so. And by cutting the duration of the radar on the back end, that means you have around 5 seconds less uptime of your teammates being able to shoot at those targets you're spotting. Now, we can talk about random teammates and how much they actually shoot at what you radar. That can be up for debate, but it is certainly a downside. So is it still worth taking? We still retain that 10% better dispersion. Look at that salvo into the broadside Rhode Island at 14 kilometers. That is outside the range where we get the nice buff to our dispersion thanks to this weird dispersion table. And yet we're still getting some incredible accuracy. And yes, I am still stacking it with outnumbered. Stacking all of these dispersion buffs makes Petro an absolute monster at closer ranges. Another penalty here is to the bonus of AP alpha damage. So we only get 7.5% better alpha damage now, instead of the 10% we used to have. Honestly, they could take that all the way down to 0. No bonus to the alpha damage, and I probably would still want to take it, considering the dispersion we're getting here. The big downside being the lack of healing now. So playing aggressive, playing up close, playing next to caps is a great way to get yourself focused by the entire enemy team. And having a lot less healing is a massive penalty, okay? And having that healing take a lot longer to get to, also a big downside. And whether that's enough for you to stop running this legendary mod, well, it's going to be up to you and how much you value consistent dispersion. But for me, I do think I'm still going to run this upgrade. That penalty to your time of getting the same healing is really the key downside here of this duration of our consumables. You're sometimes not going to get to that 4th heal in a lot of your games, and you might die beforehand, as well as that radar duration. If you're wanting to play more utility for your team, maybe going something with reload mod or even range mod, we often were running before the legendary mod, range mod Petro instead of reload, because this weird turnover point where you go from having better than cruiser dispersion at closer ranges, sub 10 kilometers or so, to much worse than cruiser dispersion at 12 to 13 kilometers plus. Taking range mod extends that window a little further out, so you retain that better dispersion till, say, 11 kilometers instead of 8 to 10. It was a way to get better dispersion, and that is most noticed on a ship like Petro because of that weird dispersion changeover point. Standard cruisers, it doesn't help nearly as much. But once the legendary mod was here, yeah, I pretty much always took it because I just value this improved dispersion so much. especially with a ship that has such hard-hitting armor piercing. The pen here is absolutely incredible, and you have improved pen angles. So the more accurate you are, the better you can pinpoint the weaknesses on the enemy ship, even when they're slightly angled, to get some massive damage output. I find the consistency of the dispersion here is way better for my DPM than just running reload mod would be. I wasn't quite sure on that, so I had to run some games without it. I didn't do this for every legendary mod, but I had to just test and see. And, well, as we'll see, it is still very good with reload mod. But yeah, the dispersion was noticeably worse. 10% dispersion is a massive change for a ship like this one. What doesn't get shown on these upgrades is that there is a penalty to your turret traverse when you take reload mod, and that is no longer here when we're running the legendary mod. So as a small bonus, you're getting better turret traverse on your Petro when you run the legendary mod versus running just a standard reload mod build. And that's also the case with range mod. That doesn't have a penalty to your turret traverse, but since this still gives us 10% better dispersion, for the most part in random battles, I would suggest if you want better dispersion, take the legendary mod. It's doing way more for you than the range mod did. And if you don't want that penalty, just go with the reload mod. That would be my recommendation still. And definitely this mod is still worth picking up for your Petro, as reduced healing and consumable duration on your radar is something you can play around. You can use positioning to get around that. It's still a very tanky hull, one of the tankiest ships in the game when it's angled. So yeah, you get less healing, but you're not taking a lot of damage per hit on your ship. And it's hard to play around bad dispersion, okay? It's one of my main frustrations in this game is when dispersion trolls me on someone who goes flat broadside at like 8 kilometers or something like that. The Shirley type of salvos, right? So for me, I can play around the weakness of healing and survivability that is still very good on something like Petro, but I can't really play around the game deciding to troll me when a ship goes broadside on. The second game I have for you is running reload mod. So notice the much worse turret traverse, as well as some little bit worse dispersion. We're still going to get some great damage, no doubt, but it's quite a bit worse. Even running outnumbered here, around the same type of build, it's still going to be a little bit worse. Outnumbered, though, is a very nice bonus, and still great dispersion on Petro at these closer ranges, right? It's when we're dealing with enemy cruisers and battleships in that 12 to 16 kilometer range, where we still have more than enough pen angles to get some monster salvos, but that's only when your shells hit in the right spot. Getting closer to battle cruiser dispersion at those ranges, rather than just regular cruiser dispersion, which is fine. Petro's a very strong ship, by the way, okay? I'm comparing this to the old legendary mod and that kind of thing. Petro is still an absolutely incredible ship. And talking about the turret traverse here, it's much less of a downside when you get 360 turrets, right? A ship like this one can rotate its turrets however it wants to. And even if it's slow to get around to the other side of your ship, you're never doing that flip your turrets around, have to do that full 180-degree spin before you can start firing again, which is really nice and makes that benefit of the legendary mod not being a penalty to your turret traverse a little bit less valuable. Something that I haven't played in a very long time is any sort of competitive. Kings of the Sea, clan battles back in the day. Petro was certainly a ship that we were using. And with this legendary mod, I wonder if these days Petro leg mod was even used in competitive, because oftentimes back in the day, now this is a while ago, 5 years plus ago, we were often wanting to use this ship as a tanky radar, a ship that you could put into a very aggressive position, and it'd be very difficult for the enemy to take it out, and that way you would just have a radar that is very, very impactful that the enemy team can't deal with very easily. So would you even want that benefit to dispersion when maybe the ship's not even shooting, it's behind a very aggressive island, and it's just there to survive and click the radar? You probably wouldn't even want to use it in that situation anyway. So I don't know. I don't know if this is actually even going to change much for competitive modes if you're playing those. For Petro, you might have still just not ran the legendary mod in those situations anyway. Perhaps I'm overthinking this, though. You comp players can let me know in the comments how accurate that would be. And honestly, if the leg mod was in use, this might be enough to actually remove it from being used on Petro in clan battles. That reduction to your healing, yeah, it's there, but that team play element of the radar duration, the uptime on your teammates being able to shoot at the targets spotted by your radar being cut by 5 or so seconds, that is very impactful. That's the difference between finishing off a low health destroyer and not, which can be game winning or losing in a lot of these close battles in competitive. So maybe for that situation, you would not want to use it anymore. For things like ranked though, random battle play, certainly, I probably will still be using this one because this ship is a little more RNG dependent. You can get these Citadel salvos with the non-legendary mod, but it's just way less consistent. And certainly if we're trying to pinpoint broadsides at longer ranges like this, it can do good damage when it hits, of course. As always, when it hits, it feels great. Much like my thoughts on Republic, you just get a faster reload with reload mod, and shooting more means more opportunities to rack up quite a bit of damage. We have similar amounts of damage as we did in the first game, playing at these longer ranges to start with, but with way more hits. The individual salvos are a little bit less satisfying, but we're reloading more often with this reload mod in this game. You do not need the legendary mod on Petro to have a great time in this ship, especially if you're not as particular like I am about dispersion upgrades, okay? It's still a great ship to play at these medium ranges, and when we get to those closer ranges, you should still see quite a bit of consistency. And the improvements to your consumables, that radar for team play, as well as just overall healing, will also make this ship quite a lot easier to play from a survivability standpoint. If you're someone who is a little worried about your positioning, or perhaps just wants to be able to play up closer and get good value out of your radar without really worrying as much about the damage you're taking, I think not running the legendary mod is probably going to be a good idea. Here we're getting to the 10-kilometer range, starting to find some of that better dispersion. Front guns only, we still get 5 out of 6 hitting here, and more than enough pen to actually get through this guy's belt armor. So that's going to be another Citadel salvo with 5 out of 6 hitting. Looks very similar-ish to the initial part of this video. I'm also running outnumbered here, which is giving us that 10% bonus, but we're not stacking another 10% on top. 10%'s a big deal, but at a certain point, there might be diminishing returns. So just run outnumbered instead of the legendary mod if you don't have it. That could be a good option for you as well. Throughout my playtime with Petro, I did notice, though, that I had to play a little bit more passive. I was always a little bit more careful than I wanted to be in pushing aggressively. It's one of the things that I love about this game is the close range battles, those kind of fights. And with the legendary upgrade, that reduction in our healing, the longer time it takes to get through all of that same healing, I was playing a little more passive than I wanted to. So playing with the reload mod here, allowing me to get up into these fights a little bit more aggressively, was quite fun, having that greater healing potential and not worrying so much about some of the damage I'm taking, letting a fire or two burn a little bit longer. And then we get shots like this at 8 kilometers where we get really good dispersion and overpens. Surely a Citadel wargaming, right? And then I want to go back to the legendary mod instantly. Yeah. We can play around the lack of healing. We can play around the reduction in our team play on our radar. We can't play around RNG, guys. It's not possible. And at longer ranges, you're going to get a lot of passive campy games at tier 10. And the ability to have great dispersion out to these 15 to 18 kilometer ranges is very, very useful. Because at the end of the day, your guns and the damage you're dealing is your impact. You can radar all you want. I mean, unless you're playing competitive or in divs, that kind of thing. There's no guarantee your teammates are going to help you out all that much. You need to be having that impact with your main guns. And trying to over push to always get that improved dispersion at the sub 11 kilometer range, somewhere in there with Petro, isn't going to be viable in every game. And with legendary mods stacked with outnumbered, man, that dispersion is beautiful. Although, notably, I'm going to just miss a follow-up salvo. If I had reload mod, maybe I would have had a second opportunity, huh? Shades of that Republic video coming through. That extra reload can be useful too. But I think for my playstyle personally, I value the dispersion because we're going to get surely opportunities. Surely This Kremlin eats citadels, and he does. Love to see it. Unlike that Zao, we do get the sits on the Kremlin broadside on. That's the kind of thing I want to see out of my Petro. We do go down here, bit of a blowout in that one, but some great times were had in Petro with both Legendary mod and Reload mod. So of course, at the end of the day, it's up to you whether you want to run the Petro leg mod or not, whether that dispersion buff is valuable enough to you. You guys know what I think already. Dispersion buffs are king, at least for me. I get so frustrated with missing some of those salvos at point blank ranges. So for me personally, I have to run this upgrade. I just must. 10% dispersion is way too good to give up. You know, they could reduce this down to no buff to my alpha damage and maybe even cut the dispersion buff in half. I probably would still run it. That's how much I cope on dispersion, okay? That's how good I think dispersion buffs are. But yeah, the reduction to your healing, and especially having to get to your 4th heal to have the same amount of healing as old Petro leg mod with 3 heals, big downside. And our radar duration going to 15 seconds instead of closer to 20 seconds with the surveillance radar mod here. That's also a pretty massive downside. The build that I was running looked a little something like this. We are definitely trying to get the most out of the guns with this one, going outnumbered as well as top grade gunner. We still want concealment though, 13.2 detect. That's some of the nerfs that they have done to Petro over the years, is reducing its concealment. Can you believe it? I think in test, maybe did it launch with stealth radar? I can't remember. I think this ship actually launched with stealth radar. It was like 11.6, something like that, for concealment. So nerfs to your conceal, you still want conceal mod, is very, very impactful with this one. 14-second reload here, not buffing that, unfortunately, but the better dispersion means those individual salvos perform so much better. Running propulsion mod here, much like we did with Kremlin, speed juking, low speed, reverse forward on islands, even open water is a great way to dodge so much incoming fire. You can pick up a lot of speed quickly and then stop and then reverse quickly. That should dodge a lot of incoming fire. And also, it just feels like the aim assist struggles with low speed changes in direction and speed. So the aim assist there will pull shells almost away from you is what it feels like sometimes. So abuse that a little bit too with propulsion mod a little bit more. 40 mil deck armor, 40 mil upper belt armor, very good still these days. Although a lot of the new releases are starting to have this as far as some battleships go. Wouldn't be surprised if the power creep going forward is that more HE and more bombs, that kind of thing, start to pen 40 millimeters in the future. Then we'll get some more power creep on armor. Seems to be a pendulum swinging back and forth. But 38 was the big one that I think got power crept recently, or is starting to get power crept right now. 40 is next on the chopping block. You're still good for now, though. Don't you worry. If you go broadside, you're going to get smashed because this ship has a large above... Well, it's above water, okay? Considering a lot of new ships, it's just below water, submerged citadels. This is a very exposed citadel still, but you get some spaced armor, and you shouldn't have to go broadside all that often because you can stay quite angled with this one. Petro, very good ship, still a very good legendary mod, but certainly a nerf to its legendary mod power. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.